Welcome to Friday's edition of COVID-19. I'm Min Sun-hee. Korea has kicked off a nationwide retail campaign aimed at boosting local consumption that has been hard hit by the global pandemic. Now, retailers are not the only entities with such intentions. Those in the tourism industry are also striving to appeal to the public, and we have more on that later on the program. But first, here are the headlines with our Kwon So-ah and Noaram. Hello.
Hi, Sunny.
So we've had a turbulent week this week, that is. And how are we ending on this Friday?
Yes, we had a lot of fluctuations due to continuous rises linked to cluster infections, as well as new infection locations, such as on a Russian ship that added loads of cases. Now, this, if we take a look at the span of a week, we have 39 cases today. That's 10 less than 49 a week before. But in between, we are seeing 50s, 40s, and also 60s. So it looks like we are going to have these ups and downs for a time being. So again, we have 39 cases as of this Friday. That brings the total case load to 12,602 here in the country. No additional death. That leaves the death toll at 282. And then we have 159 people less in quarantine compared to yesterday, and almost 200 people that fully recovered. And the reason why we're seeing a 3-digit number of people that have made full recoveries is due to the government's decision earlier this week to ease the standard for people to be discharged, especially regarding asymptomatic patients.
Right. And Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun had a few words to share about quarantine measures.
Yes, noting that soon the entire world will have more than 10 million cases, Chung said Korea's situation isn't looking that rosy either, calling on continuous vigilance as well as this.
A clear standard has to be provided to the nation's people on how to implement disease control and prevention measures in their daily lives, and to what extent they need to follow those, depending on the changing situation.
Chung made this remark on the back of the country having shifted to daily life quarantine measures around 50 days ago, noting how sporadic cluster infections related to clubs, distribution centers, door-to-door businesses, religious gatherings, and daycare facilities are continuing. With that, he also called on the nation's people to give their own ideas on better quarantine disease prevention measures and to report any possible loopholes or violations of self-isolation beginning July. Now, also in July, Korea's CDC said today it will start to inspect accommodations for foreigners, such as dormitories and related businesses, including hygiene and disinfection regulations. And this as the number of foreign laborers entering Korea is on the rise.
Right, so let's turn to the global updates then.
All right, well, I'm afraid figures will steadily go up, and over the weekend or maybe early next week, we might be seeing another digit added to the local infections around the globe. Already, we have over 9.7 million cases, and with almost 180,000 cases reported in a day on a Thursday, and the death toll stands at over 490,000. And the U.S. is still experiencing inclines here. We see already 2.5 million cases with over 126,000 deaths. And Brazil, almost half of the U.S. figure when it comes to total infections as well as the death toll. And India is slowly approaching 500,000 as well. Moving over to other places, Peru and Chile have similar numbers here, 268,000 and almost 260,000. And Iran has now over 215,000 infections. We will look into the details here later again. And another rise in Mexico, which now has a total caseload of almost 203,000. Now, the situation in Brazil, meanwhile, the second most affected country when it comes to total cases, is not seeing signs of easing as extremely high figures were recorded this week. The hotspot in Latin America America has posted almost or over 40,000 cases daily in the past couple of days, along with more than 1,100 fatalities on a daily basis since Tuesday. Now, some updates on Iran, which, as we saw on our table, has surpassed the 10,000 mark when it comes to total fatalities. 143 deaths were reported on Thursday, with almost 2,600 new infections. And according to Iranian health officials, around 2,900 people remain in critical condition. A decline in social distancing, especially at the end of Ramadan, with people visiting their families, has been attributed to the country's fear of a second coronavirus wave.
Right, so thank you for that. Stay with me for more on the domestic updates after the briefing.
All right.
Aram, let's begin with a bright outlook for Korea's economic recovery.
That's right. The UK-based Oxford Economics has listed Korea as the country with the second best prospect of making an economic recovery in Asia. Now, this is based on 4 factors: the vulnerability of a country's welfare and economic system, the strictness of lockdowns, a country's virus containment capacity, and economic policies. Now, Oxford Economics created a score based on these factors, and Korea obviously scored very highly. It was only behind Vietnam, which was at the top of the list, due to its quick containment of the virus.
And I also hear Madagascar has built an epidemic center with Korea's help.
That's right. Korea has been helping the island with $630,000 worth of medical equipment. They include many test kits, which will be used at the country's first independent COVID-19 testing center. Now, that center opened on Tuesday and was built with the help of the Korean government as well as non-profit organizations. Madagascar's president said the center would help the island's development in the medical field and also expressed his thanks towards Seoul. Before the facility was built, Madagascar was using a portion of a French medical center for COVID-19 testing. It was carrying out about 200 tests per day there, but that number is likely to increase to about 1,000 a day, thanks to the new center.
Well, that's good to hear. Now, less than a month after US President Donald Trump vowed to stop funding the WHO, a few European countries have vowed to do the opposite.
That's right. Germany and France, namely, say they will give hundreds of millions of euros in funding to the WHO. Now, the two nations did say that their increased support was not aimed at filling funding holes left by the US absence. But Berlin, for its part, said it will give a record €500 million. That's about $560 million in funding and equipment this year. Germany's health minister, however, did call for reform of the embattled agency. There's been a lot of controversy surrounding the WHO in regards to transparency and so on. Germany's new WHO support package must first be approved by Parliament also, but the government is optimistic that it will be passed. France, for its part, said it would give €90 million, about $100 million to a WHO research centre in Lyon, as well as an additional contribution of €50 million. That's $56 million.
All right, Aram, thank you for that. Have a safe weekend.
Thank you.
Now, we are poised to join the regular afternoon briefing on COVID-19. Now, as is the case, ahead of each weekend, health authorities are calling on members of the public to refrain from social gatherings that can raise their chances of infections. For senior citizens and those who have pre-existing health conditions, officials are advising against any form of gatherings within enclosed spaces. Now, this also includes religious gatherings, which have been linked to a large number of infections in the metropolitan region, not to mention the alarming number of cases in Daegu earlier this year. Now, for those who do choose to venture outdoors, out of their homes, that is, remember to wear your face masks at all times when indoors and in close proximity with others. Also, for those who choose to go to outdoor places like the park, only remove your face mask for a little while when you have secured a healthy distance from those around you. Medical experts have acknowledged the potential danger and, of course, discomfort of wearing the tight-fitting KF94 and KF80 masks in the summer heat, but advise they can only be removed when you are at least 2 arms length away from others. This, of course, is also part of the daily quarantine guidelines here in the country. And speaking of those guidelines, perhaps we can take a look at them if time permits. Now, one of the first rules is to stay at home for at least 3 to 4 days if you're feeling not ill. And should you suspect that you might have been exposed to COVID-19, do seek to get yourself tested, especially if you live in the Seoul area, as testing is free. Wash your hands at least for 30 seconds and remember to cough into your sleeves. Also, remember to ventilate. Even if you're using a special air conditioner at home, remember to ventilate at least once every 2 hours. If you're not using an air conditioner, regardless of that, ventilate twice a day and disinfect regularly. The idea also is to stay psychologically close to your family and friends and to make sure that while you're physically apart, you're still calling them regularly and making sure that they are okay. We've just heard that the briefing has been delayed by about 10 minutes. So as we wait for that briefing, perhaps we can go back, that is, to Khun Soa's figures for this Friday. Now, the number of newly infected patients has been raised by 39 on this Friday, and our total number now stands at 12,602. Fortunately, we have no loss of life today, so our death toll remains unchanged at 282. Now, we've also had a large number of people who've been released from quarantine at 159. We've also have on the screen right now our daily ups and downs for this entire week. As you can see, our greatest rise was on the 20th of June, when we saw our cases surge to 67. Fortunately, we're ending this work week Friday with 39 cases. On the global front, we have our total cases, of course, surge stand now past 9 million, with the US standing at the top with more than 2.5 million cases. Brazil there at the second post, standing with 1.2 million cases. Russia stands at third place with 613 cases, more than that, of course. Peru, Chile and Italy also we have more than 260 cases in Peru, 250,000 cases in Chile, and 239,000 cases in Italy. Now, we are still waiting for the briefing to begin. It was supposed to begin at 2:10, but we have heard that the briefing has been delayed by about 10 minutes, which is why we will probably start off with our studio discussions, and then we'll probably interrupt, that is, our studio discussions once the regular government briefing starts.
다른 어떤 국가들에서는 일부 감소하다가도 거리두기나 사회적 봉쇄를 완화하면서 더 크게 증가하거나 다시 증가 추세로 돌아서는 양상을 보이고 있습니다.
With travel restrictions and mandatory quarantine in place as part of efforts to curb the spread of COVID-19, the global tourism industry is facing a crisis like no other. For more on this reality, I have Professor Oh Ik-geun from Keimyung University. Welcome to the program, Professor Oh. And I also have Jim Bulley from Korea JoongAng Daily. Good to see you again, Jim.
Thank you.
Professor Oh, we'll start with you. Let's begin with the situation here in Korea. Overseas travel has been ruled out for the time being, and some are giving up their holiday plans, while others are turning to domestic destinations. Please tell us a bit more about this reality here.
Well, actually, for COVID-19 cases, really discourage people to have some trip, especially summer vacations. According to the one study, the result says that 1 out of 5 respondents, they gave up the summer vacations. And also people, they really like to have international travel during the summer, but they have to change into domestic travel. That kind of a big change brought by COVID-19.
Right, it's quite unfortunate, but it's a reality for many people around the world.
That's true.
Right. Jim, what's the situation like elsewhere around the world? Because quite a number of European countries have decided to reopen their borders, I hear.
Yeah, you're right. Europe is absolutely where sort of the collective focus has been on reopening borders. The European Commission advises EU countries to reopen internal borders, so borders within the EU, last week, and then to consider opening international borders wider from next week, from the end of June. And we have seen a lot of the majority of EU countries open their borders to at least some of the EU, maybe their immediately bordering countries or to the wider Shenzhen zone. Spain in particular announced this week that it will be opening its borders to some travellers from outside the EU next week at the end of June, in line with the EU advice.
Right. Now, as Jim pointed out, Spain is looking to welcome back tourists. For more on this initiative, I have Danny Han, a Korean national living in Madrid, live on the line. Hello, Mr. Han.
Hello.
Now, Spain has lifted its state of emergency after 3 months of lockdown, and it's also reopened its borders to many European Union countries. Do tell us more.
Okay, yes, Spain has finally entered the Nueva Normalidad, or new normality phase after the country's 100 days of lockdown restriction. Now there are no more restrictions of normal daily activities or moving freely around the country or leaving the borders.
Mr. Han, are you actually seeing a rise in the number of tourists to Spain right now, or is it too early to say?
Spain is one of the top tourist destinations, that is true, but I don't think tourists from other countries will immediately visit Spain because the virus itself hasn't completely disappeared. However, the government is introducing measures to stimulate the tourism industry by providing companies or individuals with financial assistance.
Mr. Han, as you just mentioned, yes, the virus has not disappeared, which is why here in Korea, we are seeing a surge in the number of cases following an ease in stringent social distancing. What is the COVID-19 situation in Spain like?
The Spanish government thinks that the epidemic is under control and the situation is getting better, but we lost more than 28,000 lives in Spain, and we still see from 200 to 300 new cases per day. I feel like people just want to forget the bad situation and go back to normal life. This week, I've seen a lot of people in the street, parks, restaurants, or sports facilities, but I didn't feel any fear of viruses from the people anymore. And the swimming pools in the villages also open, and now they're filled with so many families with young kids.
So I can assume that the Spanish public is responding favorably to the government's ease in travel restrictions and attempts to boost tourism.
That is true, but as you know, Spain has not has opened the borders, but still we don't see any new tourists from other countries. But within the countries, there are a lot of movements from one region to the other cities or something like that.
I see. All right, Mr. Han, thank you for making the time to join us live from Spain.
Thank you very much.
Right, Professor Oh, back here in the studio, let's turn our attention now to Korea then. How much damage has Korea's tourism industry suffered amid the global pandemic?
Oh, there is one important study from Asian Development Bank. They estimate the damage of COVID-19 coronavirus would be about $3 billion to Korean industry. And also, when we compare the number of international arrivals to Korea, first quarter of last year was 2 million. But this year, same quarter, it was 3 millions, now it's 2 millions. So about 50% decrease in the number of international arrivals. And also travel industry and travel agent or airline industry is really devastating. And especially the MICE industry, meeting, incentive, convention, and exhibition, so the number of convention or exhibition become almost zero case.
I see, that's quite difficult.
It's really disastrous.
Yeah, it's an alarming number right there. Jim, what about the damage incurred by our European counterparts and countries in Southeast Asia?
Well, I mean, as Professor O mentioned, the impact of travel restrictions and border closures anywhere in the world has been absolutely huge. For tourism-dependent economies, especially those in Southeast Asia and a lot of European countries, the loss of revenue is, devastating. The Asia-Pacific region, especially, is said to have taken the biggest hit in pretty much every single metric you look at. In terms of airline losses, Asia-Pacific specifically is supposed to have taken over $100 billion worth of losses, significantly more than any other region. Both Europe and Asia, hotel accommodation reservations are down about 60%, which is more than anywhere else in the world. And job losses in Asia are around 60 million, which is significantly higher than any other continent. So Asia in particular, and then closely followed by Europe, appear to be the hardest hit.
Right. Professor, meanwhile, Seoul's foreign ministry has extended yet again its special travel advisory to mid-July, meaning Koreans cannot travel overseas until then, right?
Yeah.
Please tell us more about this special travel advisory.
Well, through advisory, in the Korean case, you have to, if you travel to overseas country, the compulsory 14-day quarantine period. Also, the travel advisory, a lot of countries over the world is not allowed for foreigners to get into their own countries. So still, reopening the market cannot be a foreseeable future for the time being.
Right. Jim, in contrast to the international travel caution advised here, the European Commission recommends the gradual reopening of all EU's external borders on the 1st of July. Now, it seems like the authorities here in the country and those in the European Commission are not seeing eye to eye on the idea of these restrictions. Now, we've just heard that our briefing, our regular government briefing on the COVID-19 situation is about to start. So we will come back to you after this briefing.
We have a short message of notice. We have a special briefing on the accurate ways of quarantine. So after the explanation by Chair Jang Eun-kyung, we will be joined by the people from the Ministry of Environment, and we will have Q&A sessions going forward. And first, here is Ms. Jang Eun-kyung with the briefing. Let us now begin our regular briefing for the COVID-19 response here in South Korea. As of June 26th, today we have 27 new local infections and 12 new imported cases. And a total of 198 more people have discharged from the hospitals, and 1,148 people are in quarantine undergoing treatment. We have no additional fatality as of yesterday. And here are some updates on domestic infections. In the Wangsung Church in Gwanak-gu District, Seoul City, we have 12 confirmed patients. We are conducting epidemiological investigation and contact tracing. And among these people, there are a group of people, 8 of which who have went to an MT meeting at the church. And these people were also the members of the choir. And a total of 12 people have been confirmed to date, and we are also conducting a tracing of contacts and testing for all of the members of this church. And at the Kupang Deokpyeong Logistics Center in Icheon City, Gyeonggi-do Province, we do not have additional case as of now, and we are also seeing people of 196 people who are on self-quarantine. Right now, 119 people have tested negative, while the others are waiting for their results. Related to door-to-door sales in Seogbu, Daejeon City, we have 1 additional case. In total, we have 72 people being confirmed to date. And KCDC acknowledges that we have been seeing an increase of the infections at venues, including small religious group meetings as well as other club meetings. So during the weekend, we ask the people to be particularly on alert. And as for religious facilities, please, we ask you to refrain from engaging in activities like chanting or also singing or eating together that could increase the risks of droplets to travel in mid-air. And if you have to have physical services, please reduce the number of participants so you have proper distance among the participants. Please please screen the body temperatures of every participant, as well as wearing a face mask, and also refrain from the activities that increase the droplet to travel in mid-air. And we had 12 new imported cases as of yesterday, and 1 was from America, and 11 were from Asia, 7 from Kazakhstan, 1 from Bangladesh, 1 from UAE, and 1 from Pakistan and the Philippines, respectively. The KCDC, we also highlight the importance of environmental disinfection to curb the virus, and here are some of the measures that we would like to introduce in these means. COVID-19 spreads through droplet infections. However, it can also spread by the contaminated surfaces after you touch with your hands, and you also touch the surfaces, and then when you touch your faces with these contaminated hands, you could also increase the risk of infection. And especially, please note that the coronavirus can survive on these surfaces to about 2 to 3 days on average. So it is very important to disinfect the frequently touched areas on a regular basis. And the accurate ways of quarantine and disinfection is as follows. Please wear waterproof gloves and masks, including other protective equipments. And also the sterilization should be also registered by the Ministry of Health. And also at homes, we ask you to utilize domestic household use of chlorine, and we believe that this is the most safest measures for environment disinfection. And also it is very important to wipe and clean the frequently touched area. And take a cloth and wet it with this disinfectant for quite a long time. And please thoroughly wipe the frequently touched areas like doorknobs, the contents, and the switches, as well as tables as well. So wiping these surfaces is very important. After wiping the surfaces, the rate of disinfection is also maintained, and it is very safe to wipe again with a dry cloth. As for bathrooms, it is very important to wipe the surfaces as well, including the taps, as well as the toilets and the bathtubs. And it is also very important to ventilate after you disinfect these surfaces. And after disinfection, also please ventilate the area, and you should also wash your hands thoroughly or even take a shower. And if you spray these sterilizing materials onto these surfaces, you need to wipe them once again in order to be more effective. And if these are consumed by the individual people, it could be harmful, so it is not advisable. And as for spraying the sterilization in mid-air, like outside at the roads, it can also lead to environmental issues, and it's not that effective, so please refrain from doing so. And at the NIH, we also continued to have research, and we have some of the announcements as follows. We have Ms. Kwon Myung-hee, the department head of the Chemicals, Environment and Disinfection area. And I am Kwon Myung-hee from the NIH, and I would like to introduce to you the safety measures and the safety use of the chemical materials to disinfect the surfaces. And with an increase in the number of domestic and imported cases of COVID-19, COVID-19, we are seeing an increased use of the sterilizers. And to this end, we have great concerns about the safe use of such material. And it is very important for us to ensure the safe use of these materials going forward for our public. Therefore, we have been cooperating fully with the local governments and institutions to disclose the safe use of sterilizers. And once again, we would like to ask the public to be on alert on how to use these materials. As the sterilizers, they kill the germs and the virus. They also have toxins that could be harmful to the human body. However, because we have a higher risk of virus infection compared to the toxins that are contained in these materials, it is very important for us to utilize and use sterilizers in a very safe way. First, it is very important to select the materials that have been acknowledged and certified as safe materials by the Ministry of Environment. And it is also important to read the user manual and to follow these measures going forward. And you could also find the detailed measures on our webpage. And in order to use these materials in a most safe way, it is very important to wear protective equipment, including gloves and face mask to protect yourselves, especially your skin and your respiratory systems. And also, as for the elderly people, they could be also highly risky to these materials. So it is very important that they do not have direct contact with these materials. And it is also very important to wipe the frequently touched surfaces as well as the floors. And after disinfection, it is also important to wipe again with a dry cloth. And please note that all of these chemical substances have toxins that could be harmful for the body, so please use these materials in a safe way. And together with the local governments, the central government is continuing to have the public on alert to have a safe use of such sterilization. We also have a PR video ready.
Right, that was the Friday's regular afternoon briefing by Jeong-young, the head of KCDC, who spoke about cases continuing to occur at small religious gatherings, and therefore she has advised members of the public to follow instead offline religious practices instead of that would be online religious practices instead of offline, given the risk of contagion when in close proximity with people around you who may be infected and are not aware that they are infected. Jeong-young also spoke about from the 39 cases recorded on this Friday, we have 12 imported cases, with 7 of them from Asia. She's also spoken about the importance not only of personal hygiene practices, but also of disinfecting your house and any place that you frequent. This disinfection is important because the virus is known to be able to survive on surfaces for at least a few days. Disinfect frequently, especially also the doorknobs at home and of course in the office area. We also had Keimyung, an official from the Institute of Environmental Research, who spoke about the importance of knowing the chemicals that you are using to sterilize or disinfect your homes and workplaces. We turn now, that is, to the studio discussion. That is, I have Jim and I have Professor Oh Ik-geun from the Keimyung University. Jim, we'll start with you then, as I already asked the professor. Seoul's foreign ministry here had extended its special travel advisory. Now, this runs in contrast to the advice of the European Commission, who has been recommending that the EU's external borders should be open from July 1st. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so it is true that some countries, not every country is going to follow the Commission's advice, but some countries in Europe will be opening their borders from July 1st to some international travel. It's not necessarily going to be a blanket decision. There's a lot of talk at the moment of banning travelers from the US and also potentially from Russia, considered very high-risk areas. But most of those countries that do open borders are likely to allow Korean travelers, Korean tourists to go back. That doesn't mean that anything except essential travel is a good idea. And there are 2 reasons for that, really. Firstly, I think one thing that we tend not to think about is that what every country considers an acceptable threshold to reopen their borders is different. And whilst here in Korea, we're still keeping everything pretty locked down with relatively low numbers. You know, if we look at Europe, if we say Spain and Germany, two major destinations, both of those countries had new cases over 400 just yesterday, and that's considered, you know, an acceptable level to reopen. In Korea, that certainly wouldn't be the case. And secondly, as Professor Oh mentioned earlier, you can travel to those countries, but when you come back again, you are going to have to be quarantined for 2 weeks.
Right. Professor, given this reality, the local tourism industry, including hotels here and tourist venues here, are seeking to appeal to people who cannot travel overseas. Are there any promotional events that you found particularly interesting?
Well, a lot of local government, they operate a very interesting programs such as moonlight tours. Those moonlight tours also we call the night tours because people, they like to travel to a lesser known or less crowded destinations, such as Yeosu, so famous for the night tour, and Gwangju, Gyeongbok Palace. And also there is some trend for wellness travel, like southern part of Korea, we call Gwangyang, they say that. Traveling for 1 month in Gwangyang. And also many local governments, they provide a bicycling program. And last one is for healing program. And this time the local community, like a rural community, they try to get the tourists from the urban areas to let them have some hands-on experience on farming. So those eco-related tourism could be popular in the future.
Right, Professor. Now, staying with the local tourism industry, quite a number of hotels that have been hard hit by COVID-19 are now seeking to adapt to the new normal with special promotions aimed at appealing to those who seek some form of refuge from the pandemic. We have more in this report.
With the tourism industry being hardest hit by the COVID-19 crisis, hotel chains are exploring new ways to attract customers ahead of the summer holiday season. A hotel in Seoul's Junggu district. This hotel launched a special promotion after seeing a sharp drop in guests. The promotion includes access to a camping zone and free rental gear to provide a unique urban camping experience. It caters to the growing trend of minimizing face-to-face interactions by offering a private and intimate stay.
코비드19 확산으로 인해 초기에는 호텔을 이용하시는 고객의 수가 감소했었는데요. 지금은 호텔에서 선보이는 다양한 프로모션들로 인해 외국인의 방문율이 높아지면서 기존의 약 80% 정도 수준으로 고객의 수가 늘어나고 있습니다.
Other packages offered by local hotels include a poolside barbecue with live entertainment and a relaxing picnic on a green lawn. These are driving a new trend in travel that mixes social distancing and healing.
Right, Professor, as seen in the video, with a growing number of people here turning to domestic travel, some are claiming that now is the time to enhance the quality of local tourist destinations to ensure a quality experience, so to speak. What are your thoughts on this, or what can be done to ensure such quality experiences while traveling locally?
Well, COVID-19 is a really provides some chance or moment for local people to discover their own countries. They really want to travel to lesser known, but previously, conventionally, people, they travel to well-known places. But now, it is no longer the case. So from the figure, as you seen that, a lot of people, they go to daily trip, and also they are pretty much concerned with safety and hygiene. So local government, they have to prepare to protect the people. What strikes tourism really strikes the destinations. So they have to prepare and pay attention to safety and hygiene more than ever.
So the reason why people are choosing to go to places that are less known is probably because they are scared of being infected. They don't want crowds.
That's less crowded destinations they prefer because try to avoid any risk of infecting COVID-19.
Do you have any travel plans this summer, Professor?
Yes, just staying at home.
I see, okay, that should be safe. Jim, despite these efforts to revive the local tourism industry, there are some who claim it's too early to reopen borders. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, this is actually something I can talk about from a very personal note, because during the early days of the pandemic, or the outbreak, before it was a pandemic, I was actually traveling around the world, and I moved through 10 countries, 4 continents. I was locked down in America, the UK, quarantined in Korea. I experienced border controls all over the world. And having seen the variety of the response in different countries and the different way that different people and different cultures have dealt with it, I personally think it's hugely irresponsible for anybody to do anything but absolutely essential travel until we have either treatments, vaccines, or assured travel bubbles, because you just don't know what risk you're putting yourself in, but also what risk you're putting other people in just the second you step on an airplane, really.
Right, so you have no travel plans then for this summer holiday?
I might be staying in a hotel for a night somewhere in Korea, but definitely not.
Which is why, for some people here, they're saying this particular period might be an opportunity for the local tourism industry. Do you agree, Professor?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
And what can they do to make most of this opportunity?
Well, people like to go to hotel vacation, what we call hokangs.
In Korea,
and
yes.
they really enjoy the luxurious hotel amenities.
Experiences like we saw in the
While
video.
traveling.
What are your thoughts on this, Jim? Are there any other ways that the local tourism industry here can seek to enhance its ways to attract tourists?
Well, I think the Korean tourism industry is doing pretty well, and there are a huge variety of different sort of tracks you can go down, as Professor talked about earlier. And it is true that a lot of people living in Korea, we do love hokans every now and then. I mark my wedding anniversary with one every single year. I think that there's a lot to do in the country, and there's a lot of places off the beaten track that people can still go. So, there's plenty to do if you're forced to spend the year in Korea.
You spoke about adopting taking on a staycation here for this summer holiday. Is there anything you're keeping in mind?
I haven't got any specific plans, but I think, like we discussed, going somewhere that is well off the beaten track is both, the safest idea and also a much nicer option, assuming you don't choose somewhere that everyone else has also chosen as their off the beaten track destination.
All right, Jim, thank you for that. And Professor Oh, thank you very much for your thoughts today.
Thank you.
Right, that brings us to the end of this week's coverage of COVID-19. It's been quite a bumpy ride today, but thank you for bearing with us. Now, do join us again next Monday for updates on the pandemic here and elsewhere around the world. In the meantime, do reach out to us with your thoughts and inquiries through our social media accounts or our homepage, arirang.com. Have a safe and pleasant weekend.